first time I set foot in the Charleston mansion, I could immediately feel the shift in the atmosphere. The air grew denser, almost as if the old walls were breathing out decades of untold stories and secrets, resisting the intrusion of an outsider. As an independent journalist, I've always been drawn to the unexplained, the shadows that linger in the corner of your vision, the whispers that seem to echo through the hallways of abandoned houses, the chill that runs down your spine without any reason. This mansion, standing solemnly on the outskirts of Charleston, has been the subject of local whispers for years. It's the kind of place that people speak about in hushed tones, exchanging wild tales and rumors that seem to grow more elaborate with each telling. And for years, it stood there, shuttered windows like blind eyes to the world, keeping its stories hidden in the dark. It's exactly the kind of challenge that compels me. I remember pausing at the gates, taking in the sight of the gnarled trees that stood guard around the perimeter. They were like twisted sentinels, their branches glowing at the gray skies above. I pushed the gate open, the metal groaning in protest, and as I stepped onto the property, a chill ran through me, a physical wall of cold that seemed unnatural, even on a dreary autumn day. It was as if the mansion itself was aware of my presence, and it was none too welcoming. As I approached the front door, my steps were hesitant. I was no stranger to haunted places. They were my bread and butter, after all. But this was different. The air was thick with the anticipation of a story that was desperate to be told, one that had been waiting for just the right listener. And I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was inside was just as curious about me as I was about it. I didn't know it then, but as I stood there, on the threshold of the unknown, I was about to embark on an investigation that would challenge everything I thought I knew about the world of the supernatural. The ghosts of grief were more than just a title for my next article. They were about to become my haunting reality. The front door creaked open with a reluctant groan, as if the mansion itself was sighing at the breach of its long-standing solitude. My first step inside was tentative, the sound of my boots echoing off the grand foyer's walls, the silence otherwise complete. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of mildew and decay, and I could almost taste the dust that danced in the shafts of the fading daylight. I set my bags down, the clunk of my equipment momentarily dispelling the eerie quietude. The plan was straightforward: set up cameras in the most active rooms, voice recorders at key points, and a base station where I could monitor everything. I've done this countless times, but in the Charleston mansion, each movement felt amplified, each sound a thunderous declaration in the oppressive silence. As twilight bled into the inky blue of night, I finished my preparations. Cameras stood like silent sentinels in the corners of rooms, their red recording lights punctuating the darkness. Voice recorders, little black boxes of potential revelation, were placed in the reported hot spots of activity: the drawing room, the master bedroom, and the notoriously cold hallway on the second floor. With everything set, I retreated to my makeshift base, a small room just off the foyer that once might have been a study. The array of monitors before me displayed the vacant rooms, their secrets shrouded in shadows. I settled in, a cup of coffee my only companion, and watched. The first hours were uneventful, the stillness so profound I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. Then, just as I began to doubt the stories, the mansion stirred. A soft rustling sound came from the second-floor hallway. I perked up, eyes fixed on the monitor, where the camera showed nothing but the empty corridor. The rustling grew louder, like the whisper of silk skirts across the floorboards. It was a sound that belonged to another era. Then, the temperature dropped. I could see my breath in the study, a cloudy mist in the glow of the monitors. A quick glance at the thermal camera showed a creeping blue hue spreading down the hallway, a cold front in the stale summer heat. That's when the shadows began to move. On the screen, the edges of the darkness seemed to ebb and flow like the tide, and for a moment, I was convinced it was a trick of my weary eyes. But then, a distinct figure materialized. It was vague, the outline of a person, but there was no denying the human shape that flickered at the edge of the hall. It moved with purpose, drifting towards the master bedroom, and then it was gone, as if it had never been. I raced upstairs, my irrational mind clinging to the hope of a logical explanation, a trick of the light, a malfunction of the equipment. But as I stood in the exact spot where the figure had appeared, the chill wrapping around me like a shroud, I knew this was beyond the realm of science and reason. The Charleston mansion was awake, and it seemed to have recognized me as its audience. The night had only just begun. The witching hour was upon me, the clock's chimes a stark reminder that I was a lone interloper in a domain of shadows. My vigil at the monitors had yielded little since the initial apparition, but a restlessness had taken hold, a compulsion to delve deeper into the heart of the mansion. Drawn to the library, a room heavy with the scent of aged paper and forgotten tales, I stumbled upon a leather-bound journal buried beneath a pile of musty tomes. Its cover was worn, the pages yellowed with time, but the script within was meticulous, penned with an urgency that time had not diminished. It belonged to the last known occupant of the mansion, a reclusive figure, whose obsession with the afterlife was whispered about in town. The entries spoke of communing with the dead, of a veil between worlds that was thinnest within these walls. Each page was a descent into madness, a chronicle of someone slipping further from reality as they clawed for contact with the spectral. A raid, the air around me grew colder, the very atmosphere charged with anticipation. It was as if the act of reading aloud had stirred something in the void, awakened a consciousness that had been dormant. I could feel eyes upon me, the weight of unseen gazes that bore into my very soul. The house groaned, a symphony of creaks and moans that seemed to respond to the words of the journal. Then, without warning, the room erupted in whispers. It was like a chorus of the damned, a cacophony of voices so intense that I clapped my hands over my ears. But the sound was inside my head, a language I shouldn't understand. Yet each word was clear as a bell. They spoke of lives long ended, of grief and rage and eternal longing. And from the corner of my eye, I saw them. Specters, clothed in the garb of bygone eras, their faces twisted in sorrow and malice. They were all around me, ethereal and flickering like the flame of a candle struggling against the dark. One figure stepped forward, a woman in a gown of flowing silk, her eyes hollow, her mouth a gaping maw of silence. She reached for me, and I was frozen, caught between the instinct to flee and the journalist's drive to witness. As her hand touched mine, visions assaulted me. I saw the mansion in its heyday, a beacon of grandeur and sorrow. I saw the faces of those who had walked its halls, their lives steeped in tragedy. Each touch was a life, each life a story, and the mansion was the keeper of these countless tales of woe. I pulled away, gasping, my mind reeling from the contact. The specters faded as quickly as they had appeared, but their presence lingered, a stain upon the fabric of reality. My equipment, once a bastion of scientific pursuit, now seemed absurdly inadequate. There in the library, surrounded by echoes of the past, I understood that some truths were beyond the realm of proof. The mansion was not simply a structure of wood and stone, it was a repository of human experience, a well of spirits drawn to the depths of grief. Dawn was a lifetime away, and as I emerged from the library, the mansion seemed to settle, a watchful truce restored. I knew that the night's revelations were but a glimpse into the abyss, a whisper of the true nature of this place. The ghosts of grief had shown me their reality, and I could never again see the world as I once had. The faint light of dawn crept through the cracks of the mansion, a gentle intrusion that felt like a lifeline to the normal world. As I sat there, exhausted and shrouded in the remnants of the night, my thoughts wandered through the labyrinth of fear and the supernatural. Fear, I realized, was not just the anticipation of a threat, but also the recognition of the unknown, a primal acknowledgement of our own limitations and the possibility of realities beyond our comprehension. The supernatural, then, was the natural not yet understood, or perhaps the natural that refused to be confined by our understanding. The experiences of the night had shattered the comforting illusion of a world bound by clear lines and simple truths. The mansion, with its whispers and apparitions, had revealed a richer, more complex tapestry of existence, woven with strands of life and death, past and present, reality and something else. As the sun rose, its rays illuminating the decay and grandeur of the Charleston mansion in equal measure, I packed away my equipment, each piece now feeling like a relic of a bygone era of skepticism. My notes and recordings were no longer just data, they were testament to a personal transformation, a narrative that had yet to find its conclusion. Stepping outside, the chill of the mansion's embrace still lingering on my skin, I knew that this was merely the beginning. The ghosts of grief had opened a door, and my journey through it was not yet over. There were more stories to uncover, more truths to seek out in the shadows. I left the mansion with a promise to return, to continue the investigation that had become far more personal than I had ever anticipated. But for now, there was a story to be written, a story that would challenge the beliefs of the most steadfast skeptics. The Charleston mansion was but one node in a network of the unexplained that stretched across the world, and I, once a mere observer, had become a seeker of the spaces between. The road ahead was uncertain and undoubtedly fraught with more questions than answers. But isn't that the very essence of a mystery? The ghosts of grief would be waiting, and I would be ready.